My name is Leo. I was just a boy back then, in 1919. We lived in Boston's North End. It was a busy place, full of life. Horse-drawn carts clattered over the cobblestone streets. Trolleys clanged their bells. My friends and I would play stickball in the narrow alleys. We'd chase each other around the pushcart selling bread and cheese. The air always smelled of the sea, a salty tang mixed with the scent of baking bread from the Italian bakeries. It was our home, a noisy, crowded, but wonderful place to grow up. Life was simple, and we thought we knew everything about our little corner of the world. There was another smell, though, a smell that hung over our neighborhood every single day. It was a sweet, heavy scent. It came from the giant tank on Commercial Street. This tank was huge, bigger than any building I had ever seen up close. It stood 50 feet tall and was painted a dull, dark color. It held millions of gallons of molasses for the Purity Distilling Company. They used it to make alcohol. We kids would sometimes dare each other to get close to it. We noticed dark streaks running down its sides, like it was crying sticky brown tears. The grown-ups muttered about it. They said the tank groaned and rumbled, especially when it was full. My father worked on the docks nearby. He'd come home smelling of fish and salt water, his hands rough from the ropes. He worried about that tank. "It's not right, that thing," he'd say at the dinner table, shaking his head. "It leaks. You can hear it groaning at night." My mother would tell him not to worry us, but I saw the concern in her eyes too. We all felt it. That giant metal beast loomed over our lives. It was a part of the landscape, like the harbor or the Old North Church. We just never imagined the shadow it cast would one day swallow us whole. That winter was strange. January started out cold, freezing everything solid. But then, on January 15th, the day of the flood, the weather turned warm. It was an unusual thaw. The sun felt bright and hopeful. I remember thinking it was a perfect day to be outside. My friends and I were planning to go down to the waterfront after our chores. The sweet smell of molasses seemed thicker than usual that day, almost sickly sweet in the warm air. We didn't know it then, but inside that giant tank, a terrible pressure was building. A monster was about to wake up. It happened just after lunchtime. I was on the front stoop of our tenement building, tying the laces on my worn-out boots. The sun was warm on my face. My friend Marco was across the street waving for me to hurry up. Suddenly, a sound ripped through the air. It wasn't a bang or a crash. It was a deep, grinding roar, like 1,000 cannons firing at once, followed by a terrible shriek of tearing metal. It was a sound so loud it seemed to shake the bones in my body. The ground trembled beneath my feet. Birds scattered from the rooftops, screeching into the sky. I looked toward Commercial Street, toward the big tank. I saw something impossible. The tank was gone. In its place, a wave was rising. But it wasn't water. It was a dark brown wall, a wall of molasses. It was 25 feet high, maybe more. It moved with a terrifying speed, faster than a running horse. It picked up a wagon and tossed it aside like a toy. It smashed into the side of a firehouse, and the brick building crumbled as if it were made of sand. The wave roared as it moved, a horrible, deep gurgle that drowned out every other sound in the city. My mind couldn't understand what I was seeing. A tsunami of molasses? It seemed like a nightmare. The wave crashed forward, a churning, bubbling monster. It ripped buildings from their foundations. It swallowed everything in its path. The air filled with a deafening roar and the splintering crash of wood. I saw people running, screaming. But the wave was too fast. It was a thick, unstoppable force of destruction, consuming our neighborhood block by block. I was frozen, watching the world I knew disappear under a tide of sticky brown death. Then, instinct took over. Marco was screaming my name from across the street. My mother shrieked from the window above me, "Leo, get inside! Run!" The wave was turning onto our street. It was a moving wall of darkness, and it was coming right for me. I could smell it, a cloying, sickeningly sweet odor that filled my lungs and made me gag. It wasn't just a flood. It was a living, breathing monster, and it was about to swallow me whole. My feet finally moved, scrambling backward, away from the terrifying brown tide. I scrambled up the steps of my building just as the wave hit. It slammed into the first floor with the force of a train. The whole building groaned and shuddered. The molasses was like thick, gooey mud, but it moved with incredible power. It poured into the street, filling it from one side to the other. It was waist-deep in seconds. I watched in horror as it sucked a horse and cart under its surface. The horse struggled, its eyes wide with terror, before it disappeared completely. The molasses was a trap. Anything it touched, it held on to. The air turned thick and hard to breathe. The sweet smell was overwhelming, choking me. It mixed with the sounds of splintering wood, shattering glass, and the screams of people caught in the flow. The molasses wasn't just a liquid, it was full of debris, chunks of the broken tank, pieces of buildings, splintered boards, and even dead animals churned within the sticky mess. It was a deadly stew. The wave moved slower now that it had spread out, but it was just as dangerous. It was like quicksand, pulling everything down into its depths. From our second-story window, my mother and I looked out at a world transformed. Our street was gone. In its place was a brown, bubbling river. A man was trapped up to his chest, struggling to pull himself free, but the molasses held him tight. His arms moved slower and slower until he stopped moving at all. I saw a woman clinging to a piece of a roof, floating by on the sticky tide. The world had become a slow-motion nightmare. The sounds were muffled now, swallowed by the thick goo that covered everything. It was a terrifying, unnatural silence. My mother grabbed me and pulled me away from the window. "We have to get higher," she said, her voice shaking. We could hear the molasses seeping into our building, the floorboards below us groaning under the immense weight. We climbed the stairs to the roof, our hearts pounding in our chests. We were not the only ones. Other families from our building were there too. We all huddled together, looking out at the destruction. Our neighborhood, our homes, our lives, all buried beneath a thick brown blanket of molasses. We were trapped on a small island in a sticky, deadly sea. We were stuck on that roof for hours. Below us, the molasses slowly began to settle. It was a scene of unbelievable devastation. But then, we started to see something else. We saw heroes. Firefighters and police officers waded into the goo, risking their own lives. They threw ropes to people who were trapped. Sailors from the USS Nantucket, which was docked nearby, rushed into the brown mess. They weren't afraid. They formed human chains to pull survivors out of the muck. My father, who had been at the docks, was one of them. I saw him, covered head to toe in brown, helping to carry an injured woman to safety. Neighbors helped neighbors. People whose homes were safe opened their doors. They brought blankets and hot coffee for the survivors. My family and I were eventually helped down by firefighters who placed long ladders across the rooftops. We were covered in the sticky film. It was in our hair, on our clothes, in our lungs. For weeks, the entire north end smelled of molasses. It was a constant, sickening reminder of what we had lost. The cleanup was a massive job. It took hundreds of people weeks to wash the molasses away with salt water from the harbor, fire hoses, and sand. The flood changed our city forever. 21 people lost their lives that day. Many more were injured. The Purity Distilling Company was held responsible, and Boston passed new laws to make sure a disaster like this would never happen again. We learned that shortcuts and greed can have terrible consequences. That giant tank had been built poorly, and everyone knew it was leaking. But no one did anything until it was too late. The disaster taught us that we have to listen when we hear the groans of a problem before it tears itself apart. We rebuilt our lives, slowly. The north end came back to life, but it was never quite the same. The empty space where the tank once stood became a playground and a park. For years, on hot summer days, some people swore they could still smell the faint, sweet scent of molasses rising from the cobblestones. It was a ghost of the past, a reminder of the day our world turned brown. But it was also a reminder of our strength. We survived. We helped each other. We learned that even after the stickiest, most terrible disaster, a community can come together and become whole again.